Hey everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again. Now it's time for episode 120. This is episode 127 of Album of the Day, and of course, I hope all of you are having a good Halloween or whatnot. Just sort of let you know about the holiday and stuff like that. And of course, I would like to let you know about this shirt I'm wearing too. Never worn this in a review before, but this is a Hunsu Kim t-shirt because, of course, if you watch my channel, I'm a huge Orioles fan, wanted to kind of support them there with the shirt I'm wearing today, and also it is orange, kind of just in time for Halloween, so it sort of makes sense. Okay, but anyway, aside from that, let's just get on to the review, shall we? So today's review is for another album that's on Yep Roc Records, who I have been an honorary completist of since like mid-2015. Here to review another album that they just released this year. This one was released in September, and it's for a band that has been a long-time signees on Yep Roc, pretty much since the mid-2000s. So these guys are really veterans of the label, and they're from North Carolina, just like the label is, and they're a bluegrass band known as Chatham County Line. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a different review today because, I'm reviewing a bluegrass album, which, I haven't really reviewed too many bluegrass albums on this channel because, not really a big bluegrass head or anything like that. I'm more into kind of the rock and the folk, and as of right now, hip-hop as well. But there are a few bands in that genre that I do really like still. I did a review of the latest Punch Brothers album earlier this year, even though I know they're not technically a bluegrass band, even though they play those instruments, they technically have a bunch of different genres that they incorporate in their sound. This one's a little more like a traditional bluegrass band, but but still definitely a band that would also appeal to non-traditionalists. So I think it's a band that would appeal to both traditionalists and non-traditionalists alike. The band's known as Chatham County Line. Been around since like the 2000s, but I really, never really started like listening to some of their work until like 2014 with their last album, Tightrope. But now I'm here to review their newest album that was released in September, and the album's called Autumn. So, it kind of makes sense I'm reviewing this because, it is autumn right now, and this album did come out in September. So I started getting into Chatham County Line once when Yep Roc Records sent me a copy of their last studio album, Tightrope, and I did think it was a great record. I mean, the band definitely has the musicianship, the talent, and also the songwriting chops as well. They definitely have all the things that a good bluegrass band needs, pretty much, but so I would say that they're and I definitely did really enjoy that album. This album over here, in my opinion, seems to be, it may possibly be the best bluegrass album of 2016. It's got everything in there that I think a very solid bluegrass album would need, pretty much. I'll get into some more descriptive details about this album later in this video, but why don't I just show you the CD packaging for it. Yeah, about 11 tracks on there, about 38 minutes long in length. And then there's the liner notes there. Photo of the band. The band consists of lead singer, songwriter, and guitarist Dave Wilson, who like also like produced the album too, so he's pretty much in charge of the band. John Tier, who plays mandolin and fiddle and sings. Chandler Holt, who plays banjo and sings as well, and he actually sings lead on a song here, which I'll get into in a minute, and handles writing on that track. Greg Redling, who plays upright bass, and actually he does play upright bass and sing like a typical bluegrass band would, but he also plays piano and pedal steel, which not very many bluegrass bands are using in their music, but that kind of makes them a little unique. Unique, and I like how they use that, to make it unique, but not in a way to like turn off traditionalists or ward them off or something like that. Anyway, there's the lyrics. So yeah, not too many bells and whistles here with the CD here, but it's good enough. So yeah, that's the CD packaging for the latest Chatham County Line album, Autumn. So this album, as I had pretty much found out, on like Yep Roc's website, on like their like biography on the band and stuff like that, this is the kind of album that does combine sort of the maturity that was very obvious on their last album, but yeah, also combine it with the kind of spontaneity of their older stuff, even though I haven't really listened to a lot of their like older stuff. Stuff. So yeah, I'm kind of a newbie to the band, but I'm really digging what these guys, I am digging what these guys are doing, for bluegrass, So yeah, I definitely do think that this is the kind of band that, even if you're not a bluegrass fan, I think you're still gonna. I still would definitely, recommend you still, like even if you're not a bluegrass fan, I still recommend that you still at least give these guys a try, because these guys' music a try, because, they really got some songwriting talent, and also they got plenty of musicianship, and they play their instruments very well, and Dave Wilson is also a very quality songwriter too, and I think this album pretty much shows them playing at their biggest strength, so that's why I think this record could possibly be the best bluegrass album of 2016. I'm just gonna, sort of, talk about I'm just gonna talk about like the weakest song in the album, and like get that out of the way right now. I feel the band definitely does do a good job with with creating some very poignant lyrics, as well as doing a good job with the way the instrumentation and how organic the production sounds. Even on the track that I think is my least favorite song in the album, "You Are My Light," which I do like the lyrics on that track, and and the instrumentation on that sounds nice, but it's a little. But what pretty much makes this song pale in comparison to other tracks in here is how it kind of it is maybe a little it is the fact that it is good, but maybe a little underwhelming, and also it's maybe a little too short. It just kind of breezes by for an opener and kind of fades abruptly at the end, which was kind of unnecessary. So this song would have been much improved if it were maybe a bit longer, something like that. But the album really gets going on a strong, uh, you know, but the album really starts going on strong with the song Bon Ton Brulee, which I do think is pretty interesting track. It was kind of inspiration that Dave Wilson took from, he's been known to write a bunch of songs about hangovers, and a woodpecker was kind of the inspiration for this song. There was this, he kept hearing this woodpecker outside, and then eventually a little inspiration hit, as he thought about his songs about hangovers, and then eventually started beating on his acoustic guitar, i.e. the woodpecker beating Morse code, and that's kind of the inspiration for the song. This guy who's having a hangover from a really slow night with, where he's been drinking beer and watching a rock show and stuff like that. And his head feels like a live oak, and he hears this woodpecker that's beating Morse code, and but then of course at the end, he's sort of just tell the woodpecker he's made his toll, because I'm gonna let the good times roll. It's definitely pretty, interesting, kind of hangover song in here, which, of course, Bon Ton Roulette is French for good times roll, basically. The kind of, the instrumentation that does take a bit of a woozy sort of, French music inspired approach, I think kind of, makes sense with the song pretty much. One of my favorite songs on the album is the track Siren song, which, definitely has some of the most poignant lyrics on the album, in my opinion, and also and the instrumentation has that kind of wistfulness that I do like to see from the band, band, with the very sweet mandolin, and with the really sweet mandolins and banjos and fiddles on the track. And also what's interesting is kind of the production on the song. The mandolins are multi-tracked along with the guitars and the fiddles, creating some interesting little production mixing things for a bluegrass record, pretty much. Is some of the overdubs going on here. For dubs going on here. Oh, and I forgot to mention that, despite the fact that You Are My Light's probably my least favorite track on the album, I do think the, double track vocals and the, bridge are pretty nice. Anyway, back to Siren song. What makes this song so poignant are, lyrics about how, there's a song that few living men in this world have heard, and, so Dave is nothing will take your heart like a woman singing in your ear, and you would be lost as a sailor when the Siren song they hear, it's just so, poignant and stuff like that, and, which is why I pretty much really like this song a lot. Won't necessarily talk track by track about this album, but I will kind of go into detail about some of the highlights for me on this album. We have the song Jackie Boy, which is easily the most depressing song on the entire album. It's it's a song basically Dave is talking about, this dog that he used to have named Jack, who, pretty much, had nothing, but, together, they did have something to the point where there were very few moments spent apart, pretty much, and, talking about how he could run really fast. That was one strength that he had, and, and how he was, and how he really brought a spark, into his life, pretty much, and how, he never really died, but, just, kept finding ways to survive, and, yeah, it's kind of a, so it's definitely kind of a, tearjerker moment on the album. And I think it'll especially be kind of heartbreaking. And I think the song would especially be really heartbreaking for anyone who's ever lost a beloved canine. So you just pair that with the kind of minimal acoustic guitar, uh, the really nice, mandolin stylings, and the just mournful streaks of Greg Redling's pedal steel on the track too. Track two are really beautiful on there. And then also we have the song "All That's Left," which is definitely another favorite of mine on this album. It's definitely, it's kind of a, sad song, but at the same time, it's also very poignant, and it's actually kind of fun too, with that really sweet harmonica on the track, as well as that kind of, loungy, barroom piano on the track too, as well as the kind of as well as the persistent like gang vocals on the track, and it definitely does have a lyric that does leave pretty big impression, which goes like, "All that's left of you, it will be all that's left of me," me pretty much. So yeah, there are themes of like death and stuff like that, but at the same time, it's not in a way that's like super brooding or dark or stuff like that. In a way that's still actually kind of optimistic as well. And I think this song is a perfect example of that. Pretty much. And then there's I'll also mention the song "Rockin' the River," which is a song that sort of, about kind of, this sort of, troubled sort of, hardship here, from this, like, relationship that, that Dave Wilson has been in, which, was kind of some themes going on with, tightrope themes of, like, lost love and, like, family and, stuff like that. Like which is kind of why that album was definitely some of their most mature work to date right there. It's kind of a, song, and you could pretty much tell sort of, the loneliness that Dave is feeling in lines like here in the chorus, "Life's a rolling tide. So one day I left her side, and the heart that I couldn't give her became another rock in the river." River. Like I would say, actually, some of the most memorable lines on the album, tend to show up in the choruses, which I think is probably a good thing, considering, if it's the chorus of a song, it's gotta be memorable and it's gotta stick, pretty much. And I think, the lyrics on the song pair really nicely with the really beautiful harmonies on the track, as well as on the track, and the really nice piano on the song, and also some really beautiful banjo and mandolin solos. Like, the band has the ability to really focus and crank out some great solos and stuff like that on this album too, and probably on some of their other stuff too. But just because the album is poignant doesn't mean the band brings in a little bit of darkness to the table. They especially bring that to the table on cuts like "Dark Rider," which is about this creepy guy who's like, on this like horse as black as night that, reads your name instead of numbers on his watch that's swung from a chain. So, and he's the kind of guy who makes sure that, that everybody is doing right, and, not staying up too late at night and stuff like that. So the mother seems, his mother seems to be, telling the, protagonist of the song like you better get to bed before the hour gets late. So it's kind of mysterious. Not sure if maybe the guy is maybe like maybe if he's like maybe some sort of killer or something like that. But it definitely does have that mystery to it that pretty much makes this pretty much the darkest song in the entire album. But of course, it wouldn't be an album without Autumn if it didn't have a song that would fit in with October kind of things there. And then we have Moving Pictures of My Mind, which, it definitely sees the band experimenting a little bit. So it's not so much bluegrass, it's much more like, sort of, it's not so much a bluegrass tinge tune. It's more like, sort of like psychedelic, kind of ethereal sort of instrumentation with its, acoustic guitar and piano, and the kind of eerie strings and organ on the track two, and kind of the plucky banjo on the track two, and also but yet it definitely all sounds really beautiful on this track. I will admit, and it pairs really nicely with the picture that Dave Wilson paints of kind of this past relationship that he was in, and sort of referring to that as like the moving pictures going on in his mind. So it's like kind of this cool little surreal sort of black and white film noir kind of story going on here, which I think definitely sounds different for the band, but still at the same time that's pretty much what I like about this song. Chandler Holt does handle some songwriting on here too. The guy who plays banjo in the band and also does sing as well. He has two pieces that he's written on here: Bull City Strut and If I Had My Way. The song Bull City Strut is like a little instrumental in the middle of the album, and definitely a good one at that, which really does show, Chandler's sort of, banjo skills with the notes and stuff like that, and then of course, John's mandolin and Dave's acoustic guitar just sort of follow that same line too, showing off, the skills with their instruments pretty much. So I think it's a nice little interlude in the middle, and it's probably the most traditional sounding bluegrass piece on the entire album. And then we have If I Had My Way, which features Chandler Holt handling the lyrics and the lead vocal on the song too. And I do like how in this track he does sort of, this is sort of inspired some of the travels that he took, taking a break from touring and stuff like that, to see relatives and stuff like that. And he sort of talks about how, to live my life the way I want to, of course, I won't need fortune and fame. I'll just need the people, the people that I care about most, that support me the most, whether I'm on the road or not. And if I had my way, you would have it all, pretty much. It's, definitely a pretty, interesting message there, sort of, inspired by his travels, pretty much. I think that's, which I think, is pretty nice on there, to pair with its, very kind of, wistful instrumentation that kind of sounds like a bluegrass song, maybe from the 50s or the 60s or something like that. And the closer on the album, Show Me the Door, sort of also sees the band experimenting a little bit, which also kind of sees the band experimenting a little bit. For example, this song features this piano line written by Greg Redling that he had been messing around with for a little while now, and then eventually put it in song. So that's pretty much the thing that inspired the song, and it's just very kind of fun, sort of boozy closer for the album, pretty much. Closer for the album, and I do really like, that. And I do like, that kind of, loungy, saloon-like piano on the track, as well as that really nice, that really infectious fiddle melody as well. And, its lyrics are about, the lyrics are definitely, pretty poignant on here too. It's, too, as Dave says stuff like, you gotta show me your love or show me the door, pretty much. And another way that and another thing that kind of sees the band experimenting a little bit on the track is that they actually have live percussion on the song too, provided by Ben Nugent, who actually plays some drums on the song too, which I think actually do add a nice little rhythm to the song. And there's kind of a jazzy flair to the song, too, that I think is pretty unique for this band. So, yeah, it's definitely a great bluegrass album that, it's got all the things that I pretty much would want on a really good bluegrass record, which is why, despite me not being, too into a lot of bluegrass, I still really enjoyed this album. Because of the great songwriting and the very organic production on here too is really nice. And yeah, definitely a great record with very little flaws. So I'm gonna go with maybe a strong 8, or possibly maybe a light 9 out of 10. Because it is a great album, and I certainly would recommend it, even if you're not a bluegrass fan. As I said, I definitely still kind of implore you to give this a try. That's my review of the new Chatham County Line album, Autumn, and I'll see you for episode 128.